If I may give a word of advice out there to anyone who is, say, on the run after having ventilated a health insurance CEO, if you're hungry and you need a bite to eat, Waffle House is where you want to go. They won't rat you out to the cops.
The man is Heinrich Kramer, and he is writing the most blood-soaked book of the 15th century, the Malleus Maleficarum, the Witch's Hammer, a book that would torment the world for a century after its release and be responsible for the torture and death of 70,000 innocent people.
Treating of three necessary concomitants of witchcraft, which are the devil, a witch, and the permission of Almighty God.
He goes on to say that female empowerment would bring on the apocalypse. He even made the title of the book Female to hammer home his point. Malleus Maleficarum is a hammer used only on women.
So, you must find the mark. We must find the mark.
Greetings, fellow worker slaves, podcasting at 128 kilobits from the Fortress of Squalitude, located not far from the Redneck Mecca. This is the Atheist in the Trailer Park podcast. I'm your host, Tucker. Professor Fuzznuts is in my room. Lord Nibbler is discovering a potted plant. Lord Squeakington is lurking about the trailer park somewhere. Yes, it's a podcast hosted by a guy and his cats. Get over it. And this is a Hexenhammer episode where Skullbeard and I read more from the medieval witch hunting manual. Apologies for the delays between episodes, but I've just been kind of bummed out. Part of it's about work, part of it's just in general. Work hasn't been particularly awful, but it hasn't been great either. For example, they, there's the plan is shut down from now until just after the first of the year. And you can, they said if you've got vacation time, you can use it. Great. That's fantastic. I had some vacation time, so good, I was prepared for this. Now, first thing they tell us this past week is, if you're planning on turning in your vacation time, you can't take Friday off. Too many people have already been allowed to take Friday off for anyone else to have Friday off. The other issue was a person who keeps track of all that, of who how many hours you've got of vacation time left, was out, so you couldn't really check with this person until like Wednesday to find out exactly how many hours you had. And I wasn't certain as to how many hours I had, but I figured I'd have enough to cover most of the days that we would be off and not be paid for. So, see, your vacation time doesn't roll over if you don't use it, and you don't get paid for it if you don't use it. Anyway, so I fill out my paperwork and turn it in, and when they're telling me how many hours I've got, it didn't make sense. Now, it looked like I had more hours than what I thought I had, which, okay, that's fine. I definitely should have kept better track of how many days off I had taken. Then they did this thing, and so it made it, look like I had fewer hours than what it appeared to me based on the paper I had. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't matter. The hours I would have put in, I wouldn't, well, aside from the fact that we're probably not getting paid for Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, the short of it is, I'm not losing even if I put in for Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve, I still would have had hours of vacation time left that I couldn't use or roll over or get paid for, because there's just not enough days. right? So I couldn't use, for example, if I had 3 days left over, I couldn't use them after the first of the year. They're gone. Anyways, so we go to work Friday night, and they say, we're just going to be cleaning. That's all we're going to be doing. Okay, that's fine. And, I get put on the two machines that I know best in that facility. And I start really cleaning the machines. Because I've been a machinist, because I've done a variety of jobs, I know those machines almost as well as a maintenance person does. Right? Yeah. The supervisor comes and goes, oh, you don't have to get that. You don't have to clean that off of it. I'm not worried about that on these things. I'm worried about this other stuff. Okay, fine. Well, get 4 hours into the shift. I'm done with both those machines at that level of cleaning. And so I do what everybody else is doing, which is just kind of wandering around with a broom. And what do? They come out and they say, hey, everybody, y'all can go home, right? So they wouldn't let more than 4 people have Friday off because they needed enough of us there to do something. And then when we got there, we only worked half a day. Now, I do have a little bit of good news, something that has been some fun in my life. I got to thinking about, my bike, and I'm like, I don't know if my solution to the flat tires that I was having literally on an almost weekly basis is, how long that's going to work. I mean, it's done great so far. I've had a few things that actually puncture the tire, but it wasn't so bad that the stuff inside the tire couldn't seal the holes. So it was fine. But I was like, it's still. I just kept thinking, man, I don't want to have to deal with that all the time. So I'm gonna go, and I've been thinking about getting a fat tire bike. Because the wider tires would spread the weight out a little more and would hopefully be less likely to go flat. So I'm looking them up, and I figure I'll get the same brand of bike I've got now because I've seen them in the past, and the only difference is the front forks, the rear forks are wider so they can accommodate the wider tires, and of course the tires are wider. Well, the bike that I already have it's so cheap it's practically free. It's like $200 and some odd dollars, and then $200 shipping. It's nothing compared to what I paid for. Well, my mom paid for me when the motor went out on that one. So I was like, surely these fat tire bikes will be roughly the same price. No, they're not. They were over $1,000. Then I saw, thanks to Amazon's ad engine, a fat tire bike that was electric, that was more powerful than my bike, and was the same price as the fat tire bike from the company that made mine. I says, that's tempting. And with, Trump threatening all kinds of sanctions against China, I don't know when I'll be able to get another bike, if I need one or anything like that. And I thought about it for a day or two. And I went to do my laundry. Now, I have this little wagon that I've hooked up to the back. I hook up to the back of the bike. So when I go do my laundry, instead of having it strapped to the back of the bike or wearing, strapping it to me instead of my reflective backpack, I put it on the wagon. And, bike gets everything down to the laundromat easy. And coming home, there are the railroad tracks that I have to go across, and they're at the top of this short but very steep hill. And the bike has no problem normally getting up that hill and getting over those railroad tracks. Yeah, it drops a little speed, but it's not really noticeable. So, but I think, so I figure there's not going to be any issue with, the wagon and my laundry. And I go up the hill on my way home from the laundromat, and I notice that my speed, right as I'm cresting the top of the hill, and this hill cannot be more than, the really steep incline part of the hill can't be more than about 6 feet. That's 2 meters for those of you in the civilized parts of the world. And the speed really drops off right as I'm cresting the top of the hill. And then I'm, I get over it, no problem. And I'm thinking, if Civil War comes and I've got to get the fuck out of here, I want something that can handle hills better than that, because I may have to go up a lot of them. So I ordered that bike. Came, and I put it together, and that's what I've been riding. It is fucking amazing. For starters, the bike has 2 motors, one on the front wheel, one on the rear wheel. And you can turn the front motor on or off as you choose. It is also just one of those motors is way more powerful than the motor on my bike. These are 1,500 watt motors, and they have a peak output of 2,000 watts. The bike has a speed limiter on it that if you basically enter a Konami code on the little control panel, you can take that limiter off. I have not done that because the speed now is almost 40 miles an hour. For those of you in the civilized parts of the world, that's over 60 kilometers an hour. And that's fast when you're on a glorified bicycle, because, it's got pedals, you can pedal it. It's set up, it looks like a fat tire bicycle. But it is fast. And unfortunately, I don't like the fact that the center of gravity of the bike is really high. I mean, I am just under 6 foot tall, right? Standing. When I get on the bike, my head is 6 feet above the ground. So I'm not at all low to the ground on this thing at all. And you really ought to be a lot lower, as I have discovered. I was going to work one day, and I was going around this curve, and, it's like, the bike really wants to lay over, but, it's not like, say, a street bike that is low to the ground, so when you lean over, it's not a big deal to right it back up when you exit the curve. Also, if you hit bumps just the right way, you really feel like you're going airborne and could plop over. Oh, and it's got hydraulic brakes. I don't know why it has hydraulic brakes instead of, cable brakes like my other bike does, but it's got hydraulic brakes, which is nice and all. But boy, it is really amazing being on that thing and doing nearly 40 miles an hour on it. It also came with more things than the fat tire bike made by the company who made my other bikes. It came with its own rear rack. It came with its own headlight. Well, my other bike came with had a headlight, but this one also has a taillight, which mine didn't. And it came with a few other minor little fiddly things that I don't really care about. And to kit it out the way I wanted to, so it has basically the same features that my other bike has. Lots of them are dirt cheap. I mean, for example, I bought some mirrors for it, and those were like $8 for 2 mirrors. And I mean, I spent a good chunk of change on light up pedals for it, but I still got them cheaper than I got them on sale, so they're cheaper than they would normally. Because, I like to make sure that I'm seen at night on the bike. And I'm not going to swap stuff over from the old bike, because I'm keeping the old bike as a backup in case this thing gets a flat tire or something like that. And I don't have time to change it before I go to work, because it's the tubes and tires for this thing are more expensive. They're larger, so that should be expected. It's basically a dirt bike, an electric dirt bike that's disguised as a bicycle. It is, in fact, not street legal in my state, and I did not know that before I bought it. Electric bicycles cannot go over 28 miles an hour in this state. I know that I knew before I bought it. I knew in some states that you can't have electric motors above 1,000 watts. I didn't really care because I don't live in those states, and I didn't think anything about the legality of it or anything like that until after I got the bike. And they had this bag of spare parts, and it is literally a bag of spare parts. I mean, it's nothing fancy. It's extra screws and things like that. And they say, here, these are, in case you lose something. And I noticed there was a couple of stickers in there. And I was like, well, what the hell is this sticker for? And there was a sheet of paper in the packaging with the extra parts. And, I had I glanced at it earlier, and that's how I knew these were, spare parts. And so I started looking down to see if it said anything about the stickers, and it did. And it basically said, so you can ride your bike anywhere you want. We have provided these stickers for you to put on. So it says that the bike only has a 750 watt motors. So yeah, I'm going to be doing that, putting them on the motors, so I don't have to worry. That's kind of what, seeing that's what inspired me to look up the laws in Tennessee about bikes, electric bikes. And that's when I discovered, mine is technically illegal. And so was my riding it on the sidewalk sometimes. I mean, there's almost no pedestrians on the sidewalks. And whenever I see a pedestrian on the sidewalk, I get off the sidewalk. But like on my way to work, there's, depending on which way I go, if I go one way to work, there's a section of road where there's no bike lane, and you have basically a foot or so. That's roughly 25 centimeters for those of you in the civilized parts of the world, between a high curb and traffic. I go that way. I ride on the sidewalk because I'm well away from the traffic, and there's, I think I've seen people twice on that sidewalk when I've been there. So yeah, not a lot of people. If I go the other way, there's a section of road where there's a lot of people who are parked on the street, and so I don't have to worry about somebody clipping me as they go by. If they're going faster than I am on the bike, I'll ride on the sidewalk there. And with this bike, since it goes so fast, I tend not to ride on the sidewalk as much because I don't need to, because most of the places I go, the bike can do the speed limit. And the funniest thing that has happened with me on the bike is I've been going to work, and I'll be at a red light, and there'll be a car next to me. And the car next to me will, apparently have issues with the fact that I'm on a bicycle next to them. And when the light turns green, they give it a lot of gas, and I just go across the intersection like I normally would with, depending on which intersection it is. Sometimes I've got the throttle wide open, other times I just kind of crack it. The tight intersections where I got to worry about things like curbs and debris or stuff on the roads, I crack the throttle. I don't open it wide up. But there's a couple of intersections where light turns green, I'm opening that throttle wide up because, I'm just going. And, unlike a gasoline-powered vehicle, it doesn't, you're not going to, flood the engine or screw it up if you just gun it. And it's not like I'm going to suddenly be going 90 in a 20 zone or something like that. So, and every time, because it's an electric motor, or electric motors on the bike, they have a naturally faster response time than a gasoline engine, and they have instant torque, instant maximum torque. You can, if you want, build in. They have all gasoline and diesel powered vehicles have what's known as a torque curve. And torque is the force at which something moves. It's not the speed, it's the power, right? And so internal combustion engine vehicles have a torque curve, and you can tune the vehicle's engine and drivetrain so that the maximum part of the torque curve is at different areas. Now, most people, they have a strong torque curve at the bottom, when they're beginning to accelerate, but they don't get the hardest part of the torque curve until later on. And if you're dealing with an internal combustion engine, you can build for speed or power. You can make sure that the tires put down a lot of torque all the time. You're still going to have the torque curve, but you can tune it so that it puts out more torque than speed. Or you can have it put out more speed than torque. And depending on your uses for the vehicle, determines where you have your torque curve and whether you build for power or for speed. Like if you've got a truck or a towing vehicle, you build for power, and you put your torque curve low on the low side, so that if you're towing something, it's easier for you to move from a standing stop. Whereas if you're building a sports car, you want the torque curve to peak at higher speeds, because that gives you a little extra oomph and acceleration as you go faster. With electric motors and steam engines, they naturally are 100% torque all the time. They have no torque curve. If you put a gearbox on an electric motor or a steam engine, you can change it so it has a torque curve, but this bike does not have that kind of gear setup, and I'm unaware of any steam engine ever built that had a torque curve, but I won't rule it out as being impossible. So when you hit that throttle on the bike, it goes. I can be across, if I open that throttle wide in going across a 5-lane intersection, by the time I'm on the opposite side of the intersection, the bike is doing 20 miles an hour. Easy, right? So both of these times where, car next to me has revved its engine or something at the light, or, floored it when the light turned green. I've shot out ahead of them and stayed ahead of them. I'm in one lane, they're in the opposite lane, so it's not like I'm riding in a, just a narrow section of, like, the berm or anything like that. No, these are full lanes, and they're in the left lane, and I'm in the right lane. I'm through the intersection before they are, and the only reason they ever end up passing me is either because I'm topped out at my speed, or because I'm slowing down to make another turn. And I generally don't pay any attention to these guys until, I notice that as we're going through the intersection, they're really gunning that engine. I don't pay, if they like rev their engine at the traffic light, I don't think anything about it because, it's, the time it's happened, it's been just like the guy tapping the accelerator pedal, and that could be just because the engine was acting a little funny, or it could have been like he was signaling you want to race. But one time, the one time it was a late model Camaro that the guy had a modified exhaust on, so I knew that the guy was a car guy. And then the other time was some jacked up Chevy pickup truck that had some exhausts on it. So the guy was, definitely trying to prove something. It certainly was not an off-road truck, but he had it jacked up more than you would, more than it came from the factory. Anyway, my plan when I had bought the trailer was, like I said, if I have to get the fuck out of here because there's a civil war or something, I would put something around it so that I could haul a few essential items and fuzz nuts, and now Lord Nibbler would be able to have a place for them to ride. I mean, cats obviously do not like riding on vehicles, but whatever. You know what I'm trying to say. Because there's no way I can put them on me or put them in the basket on the back of the bike and go that way. And then when I saw that there was going to be some issues with the trailer and the old bike, and I got the new bike, I started poking around to see if there were better designs for a trailer. Because the one I have, it can hold 300 pounds. It's kind of small. If you're old enough to remember how big a phone booth is, it has a slightly larger footprint than a phone booth. Okay, so, I could build, I could put a little bit of a shelter on there for the cats and to keep some of my stuff dry, but not a whole lot of room. And one of the things that I noticed in poking around is a lot of people are building teardrop trailers for their bikes. If you're not familiar with a teardrop trailer, it's basically what it sounds like, or you can think of it as the cross-section of an airplane wing, right? And they make them for cars as well. They're really neat-looking trailers, the car ones. The bicycle ones aren't bad at all, but the bicycle ones kind of have their limitations because they're not very wide. And I'm like, well, if I'm going to have the cats in that thing, I'm going to have litter boxes, or at least one litter box for them. So that was, a bit of an issue, but not too bad, because I saw a video where this guy had a Vespa scooter. My dad had one when I was a kid. I don't know why I couldn't remember. But a Vespa scooter that he had one hooked up to, and it was basically wide enough for two people to sit to sleep in the thing together. And it was, and I was like, Vespa scooter, those things aren't too terribly different than a moped. So I look up the specs on them, and I see that while the Vespa has more horsepower than my bike, it has significantly less torque than my bike does. So yeah, I ought to be able to use that thing, just, make something like that just fine. And then I watch another video, and this one is of a guy in Canada who I'd seen him build his teardrop trailer. And, I mean, it's a really nice little trailer. Sorta. And what I mean by sorta is that it's a well-made trailer. It looks good. But it's really only useful for performative camping. Like in this video, he takes it out to the woods on his farm in the middle of winter and spends the night in it. Now, there's no, like he cooks a meal while he's out there, but his storage area for his meal is, it's not a cooler or anything like that. It's just basically like your kitchen drawer. So I was like, yeah. And the other guy who he had the bigger teardrop trailer on the Vespa. That was he had a different kitchen setup, which I didn't really like. But I mean, he actually kind of had a kitchen setup on it, but I didn't really like it because it was inside the trailer, and that meant to use the sink, you were on your knees while you were doing it. But to be fair to the guy with the Vespa, you could take his trailer in Camp Anywhere for several days or longer, as is, and be quite comfortable. This other guy's, it's like he does the video where he shows him, cooking his meal and all that, and then he goes to bed, right? He has to put his boots outside. There's nowhere for him to put his boots inside the trailer. And I'm like, okay, that's fine if you know that the weather's not going to be bad, but if it were to snow heavily during the night or rain, you got wet boots. And, I noticed he was like, when he was making his food, some of the stuff was either prepped beforehand or, and even what wasn't prepped beforehand, he was still having to do it outside in the cold. And it was below a number of degrees below freezing where he was. And he was doing, he didn't have gloves on his hands while he's doing all this stuff. And I'm like, starting to develop arthritis in my hands. Bare hands in really cold weather, not a good idea. And then YouTube served me up another video that I normally would not have watched. It was basically these frat bro types who took one of those campers that slides into the bed of a pickup truck and mounted it on an e-bike. Well, an e-trike. I mean, they home built the frame. They took a regular bicycle and turned it into an e-trike, and they put that camper body on the rear of it. And they're like, this thing weighs 500 pounds. That's pretty heavy. And they, and so I watched the video because, I mean, this thing it's big and fucking square, so it's a giant sail. So I figured they're probably, they're going to have wind problems. Because, there's a stretch of road on my way to work where there just always seems to be a cross breeze, and that really fucks me up because on the other side, on the right side of the road, there's a fairly steep drop-off, and if I got blown over into that, blown off the road by the wind, which tends to blow me in that direction, I would go, it's nearly a 90-degree drop off, and I am, there's trees. So if I got blown over, I would, be falling at 30 miles an hour and smack into a tree. That'd probably kill me. Anyways, the frat bros trike has this, pickup truck camper on the back of it, and they have same kind of motor that I have on my bike. In fact, I think it was a slightly less powerful motor. And they had an electric motor on the bike that was about the same horsepower as on the new bike. And they had a battery that was it's about the size of 2 car batteries, okay? But it's the same voltage and amperage as, well, it's more amperage, but the output is equivalent to what my bike takes. And these guys took it on an 80-plus mile, and I'm not figuring out the civilized units for that, bike ride. And they had some really stupid problems with it that I'm not going to go into, but essentially, the big problem that I figured they would have, namely it being blown all over the road because the thing was, I don't know how many feet long, but it was 10 feet high, they did not have. And they had a lot of wasted space in that thing. Basically, they had a small couch in the back of it and, a little kitchen, and that was it. Their sleeping area was in an overhang above the front of the bike or trike. And so I was like, I'm watching all this, and then they're sitting there and they go through their adventure and they make it. And I happen to remember that some years ago, I had seen an article about this bicycle camper that an artist had built. And it was based on what's known as a Vardo wagon. Vardo wagons are used by they're traditionally, they don't use them necessarily very much anymore, but they're traditionally used by the groups known as Romani, travelers, or the word that they consider to be a slur, but it's the one that most people know them by, gypsies. And so I looked it up, found it, and it's like, okay, it is narrower than what those guys were using. And it wasn't as tall, but it was designed to be reconfigurable, and I was like, I can build that. So I can do everything one would need to do on a camping trip. I bathe, use the bathroom, have place for the cats to run around, inside, all that stuff, cook, and it would be narrower than what those frat bros were using, and taller than the teardrops, but not nearly as tall as what the frat bros had. And I was like, that looks really, really good. So I think I'm going to try to build one of those. We'll just have to see. All right, that's enough blathering, and I'm going to have to cut a lot of this down. Let's get to Skullbeard and I reading more from Hexenhammer.
Prescribed remedies, to wit, the lawful exorcisms of the church for all sorts of infirmities and ills due to witchcraft, and the method of exorcising those who are bewitched.
Oh, and I need to point something out. I cannot track down the source, but I was listening to a BBC history podcast this past weekend.
Uh-huh.
And they were talking about the history of witchcraft.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that they said was basically up until right around this book was written, Catholic Church did not take witchcraft seriously. Now, this is not to say that the book inspired the Catholic Church to take witchcraft seriously, or that this book was a manifestation of the Catholic Church deciding to take witchcraft seriously. Just that they both seem to have popped into existence at the same time. And prior to about the mid to late 1400s, which is also the same time Gutenberg introduced the printing press, now that I think about it.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't believe that witchcraft was really a thing in the evil sense. They thought that people might have magical abilities, but that they were, given those things by gods, or it was by God, or it was some kind of just, knowledge of the natural world that they were able to exploit. They did not think that they were in service to the devil.
So, this is like the first satanic panic?
Yeah.
The first culture war?
Yeah. It's just a question whether or not which one came first, this book or the satanic panic.
I don't know. It's hard to say.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to bug somebody about this. Because you know why the first book Gutenberg printed was the Bible, don't you?
Yeah. You weren't supposed to do that.
Well, because, he figured that would be the thing that would sell the most and make money. Because he basically went bankrupt building his first printing press.
Yeah.
And that was the way to recoup the money, because everybody loves the Bible. Well, except the Catholic Church.
Or anybody who's read the fucking thing.
Yeah. And so he did that to try to make money, and then,
serves him
that
right.
kind of didn't work, and other people started coming out with other books, and yeah.
Serves him right for trying to print the most stolen book in the world.
Yeah. Abby Hoffman is no doubt jealous wherever he is. The 60s protester, not the guy who invented LSD.
No, not Albert. Oh.
Yeah. Oh, and speaking of Albert, I have a funny story about that.
Oh. Okay.
So, I was in college, sitting in the smoking area, back when they had those, of one of the student cafeterias. And I've got my headphones to my Sony Discman in, and I'm listening to one of Nine Inch Nails' early albums when they were still really angry, right? And I just got this thing going full blast, and I'm sitting there smoking a cigarette, drinking a coffee. And this guy walks, and I'm like, the table I'm sitting at is here, and then there's the door to go out there. And this guy walks up, go out the door, and he looks vaguely familiar, but I can't exactly place him. And he goes, "Hey, man, you look like you could need this." And he hands me this rolled up poster, right?
Okay.
And I'm like, "Well, thanks, man." And he goes out, and I unroll the poster, and it is a hand-drawn image of Albert Hoffman. And on the left and right side of the image, in psychedelic lettering, it says 50 years ago today, it was 50 years ago to that date, Albert Hoffman fell off his bicycle. And then, there's LSD written in psychedelically all over the place. I just fucking busted out laughing when I saw that. I was like, yeah, I did need that. And then later I ran into the guy, and he's like, "You look familiar." And I says, "Dude, you gave me the poster," and I explained things. He was friends with my roommates, and we had briefly met once before that.
Ah, okay.
So, but yeah,
Small world.
I know. All right. It has already been stated that witches can afflict men with every kind of physical infirmity. Therefore, it can be taken as a general rule that the various verbal or practical remedies which can be applied in the case of those infirmities which we have just been discussing are equally applicable to all other infirmities, such as epilepsy or leprosy, for example. I need to point out that over 90% of the population is naturally immune to leprosy.
Oh.
And as lawful exorcisms are reckoned among the verbal remedies and have been most often considered by us, they may be taken as a general type of such remedies, and there are 3 matters to be considered regarding them.
I'm sure there are. First, we must judge whether a person who has not been ordained as an exorcist, such as a layman or a secular cleric, may lawfully exorcise devils in their works. Wait, secular clerics can exorcise devils? Interesting. Bound up with this... right? Bound up with this question are 3 others, namely, first, what constitutes the legality of this practice? Secondly, the 7 conditions which must be observed when one wishes to make private use of charms and benedictions, and thirdly, in what way the disease is to be exorcised and the devil conjured.
This sounds like it has the possibility to be interesting.
Yeah, maybe.
Whether or not it will be is another matter, but
Entirely.
I'll take the next 2 sentences since that's what they are. Secondly, we must consider what is to be done when no healing grace results from the exorcism. Imagine that.
Unthinkable.
Yeah. Thirdly, we must consider practical and not verbal remedies.
Yeah, talk is cheap, man.
Together with the solution of certain arguments.
Yeah. I'll believe that when I see it. For the first, we have the opinion of St. Thomas in Book 4, Distribution 23. He says, when a man is ordained as an exorcist or into any of the other minor orders, he has conferred upon him the power of exorcism in his official capacity, and this power may even lawfully be used by those who belong to no order. But such do not exercise in it their official capacity. Similarly, the Mass can be said in an unconsecrated house, although the very purpose of consecrating a church is that the Mass may be said there. But this is more on account of the grace which is in the righteousness than the grace of the sacrament. Interesting. When I was growing up, I was briefly introduced to a cult known as the 2x2s, the Workers and Friends, the Black Sox, Damnation Army, whatever. They held church in houses.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would think that, consecrating a building so it's officially holy to celebrate Mass in there would be a fairly simple process,
Yeah, sprinkle some water, burn some incense.
Yeah, say a couple of words, you're done. It's, it's not like you got to find a chicken, sacrifice it, and wave it around in just the right way or anything.
No.
But then again, what the fuck do we know?
Exactly.
From these words, we may conclude that although it is good that in the liberation of a bewitched person, recourse should be had to an exorcist having authority to exercise such bewitchments, yet at any times other devout persons may, either with or without any exorcism, cast out this sort of diseases.
Clear as mud.
Yep.
For we hear of a certain poor and very devout virgin, one of whose friends has been grievously bewitched in his foot, so that it was clear to the physicians that he could be cured by no medicines. But it happened that the virgin went to visit the sick man, and he at once begged her to apply some benediction to his foot. She consented, and did no more than silently say the Lord's Prayer and the Apostles' Creed, at the same time making use of the sign of the life-giving cross. The sick man then felt himself at once cured, and that he might have a remedy for the future, asked the Virgin what charm she had used. But she answered, "You are of little faith, and do not hold to the holy and lawful practices of the Church, and you often apply forbidden charms and remedies for your infirmities. Therefore you are rarely healthy in your body, because you are always sick in your soul. But if you would put your trust in prayer and in the efficacy of lawful symbols, you will often be very easily cured, for I did nothing but repeat the Lord's Prayer and the Apostles' Creed, and you are now cured." Yeah.
This example gives rise to the question whether there is not any efficacy in other benedictions and charms and even conjurations by way of exorcism. Where they seem to be condemned in this story, we answer that the Virgin condemned only unlawful charms and unlawful conjurations and exorcisms. All right, Father McConaughey. Have you got the permit to do that exorcism? Or have ye forgotten to file the paperwork yet again?
In triplicate. To understand...
One for our records, one for your records, and one to lose so the Russians don't get it.
To understand these last, we must consider how they originated and how they came to be abused. For they were in their origin entirely sacred, but just as by the means of devils and wicked men all things can be defiled, so also were these sacred words. For it is said in the last chapter of St. Mark, of the apostles and holy men, "In my name shall they cast out devils," and they visited the sick and prayed over them with sacred words, and in after times priests devoutly used similar rites, and therefore there are to be found today in ancient churches devout prayers and holy exorcisms which men can use or undergo when they are applied by pious men as they used to be, without any superstition. Right. Even as there are now to be found learned men and doctors of holy theology who visit the sick and use such words for the healing not only of demoniacs, but of other diseases as well. Yeah.
Bring out your demoniacs! Bring out your demoniacs!
Without any superstition. That's just like, bang, right in there. I didn't even see it.
But wait.
There's more?
The first sentence. But alas, superstitious men have, on the pattern of these, found for themselves many vain and unlawful remedies which they employ these days for sick men and animals. And the clergy have become too slothful to use any more the lawful words when they visit the sick. On this account, Gulielmus Durandus, I'm guessing that's how it's named, how it's pronounced, the commentator on Saint Raymond, says that such lawful exorcisms may be used by a religious and discreet priest, or by a layman, or even by a woman.
Oh, the horrors.
Horror of horrors of good life and prove discretion by the offering of lawful prayers over the sick, not over fruits or animals, but over the sick. I'm not going to touch that. There's a joke that could be made, but I'm not going there. For the gospel says, "They shall place their hands upon the sick, etc. And such persons are not to be prevented from practicing in this way, unless perhaps it is feared that, following their example, other indiscreet and superstitions should make improper use of incantations." It is these superstitious diviners whom that virgin we have mentioned condemned when she said that they who consulted such had weak, that is to say, bad faith.
Oh, isn't all faith bad and weak? Nothing fails like prayer.
Gotta have faith. Faith. Dun, 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 dun.
Now, for the elucidation of this matter, it is asked how it is possible to know whether the words of such charms and benedictions are lawful or superstitious, and how they ought to be used, and whether the devil can be conjured and diseases exorcised. Short version? No.
In the first place, that is said to be lawful in the Christian religion, which is not superstitious. Au contraire, mon frère.
I might have to go ahead and disagree with that.
Yeah. And that is said to be superstitious, which is over and above the prescribed form of religion. Wow, yeah, see, if you were a level 1 superstitious kind of person, we could handle that, but you're at a level 3, and that's a problem. So if you could go ahead and dial it back a bit, yeah, that would be great.
It's either that or give us 30%, and bump you up to a level 99.
See Colossians 2, which things indeed have a show of wisdom in superstition, on which the gloss says, superstition is undisciplined religion. That is, religion observed with defective methods in evil circumstance.
Okay, these guys are just talking shit now.
Yep.
Anything also...
Oh my God. Oh, I got to interrupt.
Oh, no.
Because I Googled Colossians 2.
Uh-oh.
Or 2 Colossians. And this is my search results page. And give me a second here. Oh, yeah. No, that's wrong. 4. There we go. I'm going to send you here in a second the image of exactly what I got. So that when I say it, you can confirm that I'm not bullshitting anybody. And the first result with the first line says, Colossians 2, NIV, I want you to know how hard I am.
Yeah. That's... Whew.
Then it goes on to say, I want you to know how hard I am contending for you and those at Laodicea, and for all who have not met me personally. My goal is that they may. Woo!
That's brutal.
I got a few things to sort out, but one of the things I want to do is start selling T-shirts that just have, the citations for a Bible verse on them.
Mm-hmm.
So, Colossians 2, or what is it? Exodus 20:23. The one about the donkey dicks.
Mm-hmm.
Right. You don't have the verse. You just have, the chapter.
Chapter and verse.
Right.
Yeah.
So people could, and you just say to people, well, you need to look it up, because if I told you, you wouldn't believe me. And if, they look it up on their phone, and of course it's some kind of horrific thing.
Actually, that would probably make a pretty good side hustle.
Yeah, that's what I've been thinking. Issues related to shit that Ed Zitron has talked about have delayed me on that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not me, it's the tech, because they're assholes.
Yep, pretty much. Assholes who stand to make a hell of a lot of money by turning the world into shit.
Yeah.
Anything also is superstition which human tradition without higher authority has caused to usurp the name of religion. Such is the interpolation of hymns at Holy Mass, the alteration of the preface for requiems, the abbreviation of the creed, which is to be sung at Mass, the reliance upon an organ rather than upon the choir for the music, neglect to have a server on the altar in such practices. Ooh, I'd love to have a server on the altar. But to return to our point, when a work is done by virtue of the Christian religion, as when someone wishes to heal the sick by means of prayer and benediction and sacred words, which is the matter we are considering, such a person must observe 7 conditions by which such benedictions are rendered lawful, and even if he uses adjurations through the virtue of the divine name, and by the virtue of the works of Christ, his birth, passion, and precious death, by which the devil was condemned and cast out, such benedictions and charms and exorcisms shall be called lawful, and they who practice them are exorcists or lawful enchanters. See Saint Isidore,
Etymology?
Etymology, I don't know. 8 enchanters are those whose art and skill lie in the use of words.
Okay.
Blessed are the hustlers.
Now, something I have to point out here is this is somebody ranting in the late 14, early 1500s.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What's his name? Mel Gibson.
Yep.
Belongs to an extremist Catholic sect that thinks everything after Vatican II, which happened in the 1960s, I think.
Yeah, 60, 63, something like that, yeah.
Is the work of Satan.
Yeah. We had one of those for a premiere.
Yeah, and this guy is saying that shit that nutbags like Mel Gibson think is okay is in fact too fucking liberal and satanic.
Yep.
But sure, it's the Muslims we got to worry about.
No, it's not the Muslims you got to worry about.
It's fucking religion, regardless of what faith or denomination.
Yep.
Period. Paragraph.
Yep. Once they've drank enough Kool-Aid, then they're kind of off the deep end or whatever.
Yeah. One of the podcasts I listen to, there's a host who is friends with someone who survived the Jonestown massacre.
Oh, okay.
And so, as you can imagine, he kind of gets twitchy when somebody brings up
Kool-Aid.
the phrase.
Yeah. Well, Flavor Aid.
Well, it was both, actually, but that's neither here nor there. But I have heard him mention it in reference to modern tech in certain areas, and it's like, wow.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and that was, I mean, I'm old enough to remember when that happened.
Yep. I have vague recollections.
I was a little kid, and we used to listen to Paul Harvey News. And he came on one day, and he was talking about it. And it was like, oh.
Yep.
And then we found out it was worse than even what was known at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And the first of these conditions, I just keep hearing, and the counting shall be 3. Thou shalt not count to 4. And 5 is right out. As we learn from St. Thomas, is that there must be nothing in the words which hints at any express or tacit invocation of devils. Okay, out, damn spirit, doesn't seem like it's an invocation to me.
I don't know. I don't know how these things work.
Yeah. If such were expressed, it would obviously be unlawful. But would it be unlawful good or unlawful evil?
Right?
I don't know. This is bringing my whole D&D stuff back. If it were tacit, it might be considered in the light of intention, or in that of fact, in that of intention, when the operator has no care whether it is God or the devil who is helping him, so long as he attains the desired result. In that of fact, when a person has no natural aptitude for such work. Oh, wow. I believe we're talking about an awful lot of billionaires. But create some artificial means. Again, it sounds like some of the billionaires. And of such, not only must physicians and astronomers be the judges, but especially theologians, for in this way do necromancers work, making images and rings and stones by artificial means. I'm struggling to understand what would be a natural means of making a ring. Since, you have to get the ore, purify it, and then, cast or hammer the ring.
Yeah.
You got to cut the stone.
Yep.
Anyways, which have no natural virtue to the effect the results which they very often expect. Therefore, the devil must be concerned in their works.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Secondly, the benedictions or charms must contain no unknown names, for according to St. John Chrysostom, such are to be regarded with fear, lest they should conceal some matter of superstition. You're so close.
Yeah. And are you, I think we've talked about this before, are you familiar with the Arthur C. Clarke story, The 9 Billion Names of God?
I've heard of it. I'm not sure if I've read it. I don't think I have.
It's well worth reading. Basically, the premise of the story is that these Tibetan monks, who have been, busy scribbling away for centuries, go to a computer company and say, we want a computer to print out all the names of God. Because when this happens, it'll, reset the universe. And the computer company folks are like, is the check going to clear? Because if it is, we'll do it. So they get there into Tibet, they set them up, they start the computer program, and they're like, wow, this is going faster than we thought. We better get out of here before, the final result, name is spat out of the machine on the printer. So just as they're getting on the plane to leave Tibet, they notice that all the stars are winking out one by one. And I've been trying to, I'm not paying for an account, but I've been trying to get all these chatbots to spit out the 9 billion names of God. I mean, either way we win. I tie up the machine for a long fucking period of time, or everything gets reset to zero.
Sounds like win-win to me.
Thirdly, there must be nothing in the words that is untrue. For if there is, the effect of them cannot be from God, who is not a witness to a lie.
Might have to go ahead and disagree with that, but whatever. You do you. Boo.
Because, I'm just thinking God sees all, knows all, so that would by default make him a witness to a lie.
I'm sure it does.
If he can't be a witness to a lie, that means the easiest way to hide from God is to be a liar. Which would explain a few things.
Would explain a lot these days, yes.
But some old women in their incantations use some such jingling doggerel as the following. Blessed Mary went a walking over Jordan River. Stephen met her and fell a talking, etc. I don't know, man.
I don't know. Whatever. Fourthly,
Jingly keys.
yes, exactly. Fourthly, there must be no vanities or written characters beyond the sign of the cross. Therefore, the charms which soldiers are wont to carry are condemned. All right, sure, whatever.
Yeah. So, wonder what they'd make about all those bulletproof Bibles. And I mean, these are actual bulletproof Bibles. They have
Kevlar covers.
and metal plates inside. You know,
Oh, nice.
you've got Kevlar metal plate, and you've got the, you know, they're just the New Testament, and then you've got another metal plate. And yeah,
What butchery is this?
when I was working at the Weldon Books / Borders Distribution Center, when Gulf War 1.0 happened, we got a lot of those in. You know, and they were about that big, you know, from here down on my phone.
Oh,
You know, pocket size. So
Yeah,
you
yeah.
could stick them in your shirt pocket, which,
you gotta
you
think.
know, given
You gotta think bigger, man. Make them big enough to fit in a fucking plate carrier.
yeah, I mean, because, you know, your heart is really in the center of your chest with, you know, it leaning
less,
slightly
yeah.
to the left. It's not
Yeah.
where your titty is. It's in the middle. But I don't know. Maybe it's like magic underwear.
Oh, yes. And fire insurance.
Yeah. Fifthly, no faith must be placed in the method of writing or reading or binding the charm about a person or in any such vanity which has nothing to do with the reverence of God, without which a charm is altogether superstitious.
So you telling me you could have two people. One is devoutly faithful, and the other, whatever. And they can perform exactly the same ritual with the same incantations. And one is totes cool, and the other is unlawful.
But, and they both can have the same result in curing the person of their disease or demonic possession.
Or not.
Right.
Like, this has not brought me any greater understanding of how this shit works.
Right. And here's the thing that I'm confused about. My understanding is that in Catholicism, you're supposed to appeal to somebody other than God or Jesus first, because if you have, you know, the Virgin Mary to act as an intercessory on your behalf, you'll have better results. So if you've got a St. Christopher statue on your dash to protect you during your travels, that's not as good as having the statue of Jesus on your dash, even though the St. Christopher is patron saint of travelers and things like that. So you ought to be good, but you're not, because Jeebus.
Yeah, mysterious ways and all that.
I smell toast.
Yeah. Sixthly, in the citing and uttering of divine words and of holy scripture, attention must only be paid to the sacred words in themselves and their meaning, and to the reverence of God, whether the effect be looked for from the divine virtue or from the relic of saints, which are a secondary power, since their virtue springs originally from God. So there's your intercessor.
Right. And should anyone forget, this book has already made the claim that, if anything, evil happens to you because of the actions of, say, a demon, it's because God gave that demon permission to fuck with
Yep.
you.
Yeah, everything is permitted. It's all good.
I do not have the right kind of drugs for this.
No.
I need
got-
some ergot.
Yeah, that would probably help. I got
Yeah.
I got some Afghan black. It's pretty nice. But not the appropriate drug for this.
Nope. Ergot, I think.
Yeah.
Because they would have had that when they were writing this, I'm sure.
Or
Maybe not deliberately, but seventhly, the looked for effect must be left to the divine will, for he knows whether it is best for a man to be healed or to be plagued or to die. This condition was set down by St. Thomas.
yeah, sure he does.
Man, as somebody who got to spend the late 80s, early 90s watching a whole shitload of my friends die of AIDS.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
there's nobody deserves that shit. I don't
No.
care what kind of evil person they would have become in their life. Nobody deserves the kind of suffering that I saw in those cases.
No. If God
yeah,
is real,
it's-
he will have to beg my forgiveness.
Yeah.
So we may conclude that if none of these conditions be broken, the incantation will be lawful, and St. Thomas writes in this connection on the last chapter of St. Mark, and these signs shall follow them that believe. In my name shall they cast out devils, they shall take up serpents. From this it is clear that provided the above conditions are observed, it is lawful by means of sacred words to keep serpents away. Wait, I thought they were going to take up serpents.
Right.
Like, don't you have some Pentecostals or something that like to do that shit?
Dude, I am friends with the great grandson of the guy who started those Pentecostal churches.
Ah, okay.
He's a pagan.
Okay, does he still play with snakes?
No,
Oh, okay.
I mean, you know, if he does, you know, he has, you know, the kind that you would expect somebody to have, like a boa constrictor.
Yeah.
Right.
Not a timber rattler or anything like that.
Right. And his dad was a NASA engineer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, there are stories I could tell about that dude. In fact, I need to do a quick Google here for a second.
Fine then.
Because there we are. I need to see if somebody's out of jail. Wow. Here we are. Oh, yeah. No, I think he's not been a recent update. When was this released? Oh, maybe he is out. Okay, so way back when in the late 80s, when I was in college, I met this guy by the name of, he goes by D.A.C. Crowell. I knew him as Andrew.
All right.
He is a composer, New Age music primarily, but he has done some classical work. He, amongst many other things, was a furry.
Oh, back in the 80s? Before people
Right.
knew that furries were a thing.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, he started working on an opera based on a furry comic book entitled Xanadu.
Okay.
It has absolutely nothing to do with the Elton John, Olivia Newton
Olivia
Movie.
Newton-John, yeah.
And So, anyways, he, at some time prior to when I knew him, was dating some gal named Susan, who was pretty weird. And she eventually hooked up with a guy by the name of Byron, who is the grandson or great-grandson of the snake handler founder.
Okay.
And at some point, Andrew, who had all kinds of psychological problems, was coming back to the States from Canada. And
that's it for this episode of the Atheist in the Trailer Park podcast. You can subscribe to the show on iTunes. It's also on Stitcher, and most of the episodes are on YouTube. Follow the show on Twitter at tparkatheist, and it's on Facebook at facebook.com/trailerparkatheist. You can email me at trailerparkatheist@gmail.com. Show notes can be found at tparkatheist.blogspot.com. If you happen to like the podcast, please rate it on iTunes. If you'd like to donate to support the podcast, there's a donate button on the show notes page. You can also support the show on Patreon at patreon.com/TNTucker.
The podcast, there's a donate button on the show notes page. You can support it via Patreon at patreon.com/TNTucker. Thanks for listening.
Say goodnight, Fuzz-Nuts.
All I know is this violates every canon of respectable broadcasting.
Damned cat.